What's up, guys, and welcome to the Week 3 Player Pool Show. Got a few games, high totals this week, and it seems like the ownership might be going to the wrong players in those games and just the wrong games in general. And we'll dig into that right after this. What's up, guys? Simon Edwards at PumaCom here with Heat Seeker Sports. You're watching the NFL Week 3 Player Pool Show. I'm going to be building some DraftKings lineups on this show and going through all the different matchups and all the different games to find out where the sneakier plays might be or where the values might be this week. And we're going to build some DraftKings lineups to try to win some more money. We've had a lot of success on this show the last couple weeks. Last week, ended up hitting on a few different lineups, and in week 1 ended up coming in third in the slant building lineups on this show. So hopefully this week we have continued success. Make sure to hit that like button. 30 likes is going to trigger a shorter video. Once I get 30 likes, I usually put out a shorter video about an hour, maybe an hour or two before lock, with some final thoughts on my favorite players on the slate. And you're going to want to subscribe to the channel and sign up for alerts so you don't miss that shorter video. Those things have been hitting really well. Like the short videos for the main slates have been basically, 80%, 75, 80% success rate on those. So you're definitely going to want to subscribe to the channel. On top of that, I'm looking for 1,000 subscribers. I'm at 880 right now, so I want to keep that going and hit that 1,000 mark, maybe before week 4 at the pace that we've been going. So help me out there. Appreciate it. And let's start looking at these lineups. All right, so we got a pretty interesting slate this week. A lot of good values on it, I think. I think some of these higher total games, it seems like the ownership is going to the wrong places, or at least from what my spreadsheet is telling me. But we can take a look at these and start to build our player pool for DraftKings lineups. You can use a lot of these for FanDuel as well. I know I don't do enough focus on FanDuel, but maybe, you guys get me to 50 likes and I'll put out a, something to do with FanDuel. Maybe I'll do a FanDuel short at some point before lock as well. So let's take a look at the first game here, which is going to be the Giants versus Cleveland. Actually, before we do that, let's just look at the overall pricing here. Let's see. So if we're scrolling down, we like to start cheap. And I think I see the cheapest starting quarterback that I see that I like right now is Andy Dalton. Dalton, if you watched the show last year, started him against, I can't remember who it was, but it was when they pulled Bryce Young last year. And I really liked Andy Dalton in the matchup because a veteran presence with those receivers. They had weapons that had the ability to catch the ball, but they just didn't have a quarterback that could throw to them. So when Andy Dalton was coming in for Bryce Young, that opened up a lot of opportunity for guys like Adam Thielen and stuff like that to have a competent quarterback throwing to them, because they got decent veteran receivers on the team. They just don't have competent quarterback throwing to them. And if I'm looking at the actual matchup against, let's see, who's Carolina playing? They're playing Vegas this week, and it looks like there is some good opportunity there on Carolina's side to get some points there. And on the Vegas side, there's obviously points there because Carolina's defense is not good, and that's going to leave us with a sloppy shootout potential for that game. So that'll be interesting to try some building with. So we'll do that a little bit later on in the show. If we scroll up a little bit more, Andy Dalton's at 4,800. I can't remember recently seeing a quarterback that cheap, but I probably have. I just can't remember. Let's see. Who else do I like? Malik Willis is cheap at 5K, but I don't like him. His doesn't seem to have a lot of upside, but I do like that McFleur was able to use him last week, and he did a good job with using him. Levis is cheap, but I'm not into that play. Minshew, the other side of that's potential game stack, is at 5,300, and that is also interesting. So we can try it both ways with Dalton and Minshew. Justin Fields is cheap, but he's got a tougher matchup. Darnold seems to be cheap every week. He's at 5,500 still. So let's see what his salary's done. He's gone from 5,200 the first couple weeks to 55, so not a huge jump there. Sam Darnold still some value there, but he's playing against Houston, so it seems like a pretty decent matchup. Let's see. Houston is giving up 18.2 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position, which doesn't sound like a lot, but this season that's a significant amount. So that's pretty good there for Darnold's matchup. So he's a guy that we can keep in our player pools, especially given the offense on the other side of the ball there. Deshaun Watson has not been doing bad this year. Well, he didn't do great in week 1, but last week, 15.4. Like I said, like that's seems like a low number, but it's not horrible, especially for these cheaper guys. The way that quarterbacks have been going this year. See what Deshaun Watson's matchup is against the Giants. I mean, like that's a matchup that's only been generating 14.5 DraftKings points to the quarterback position. Most people have been playing with a lead against the Giants and running the ball. 26.5 DraftKings points a game to the running back position. But the problem with the Browns is they don't have a reliable running back. Ford has not been that great, Jerome Ford. But Deontay Foreman is interesting this week because he came in last week. He was getting a lot of the work despite not being the starter. And I think they might be kind of run their course with Jerome Ford. Maybe it's time to give Deontay Foreman a shot here, and I think we can get some value there on ownership. So we'll take a look at that. Let's see, other than that, Geno Smith has a potential this week. I'm not really into Geno Smith. Now, Caleb Williams has an interesting matchup against Indy this week because Indy's defense is just awful. And that has mainly been against the running backs. We've been targeting them every week so far against running backs, but they've also given up 25 DraftKings points a game to the wide receiver position. Problem is, I don't know if Indy's going to be able to do anything against Chicago's defense because Anthony Richardson has not been an accurate quarterback. But in general, Chicago's only allowing 19 DraftKings points a game to wideouts and 6.9 to slot receivers. And then on top of that, only 11.5 DraftKings points a game to quarterbacks. So that's not a great matchup for Anthony Richardson. So let's keep going up here. Purdy's got a good matchup against the Rams. Question is going to be, is the Rams going to be able to put up any offense? Or are we going to see Jordan Mason just running the air out of the ball this week? Other than that, high-priced guys, I like Murray this week. And Stroud, I do like Stroud this week. And, Jackson and Hurts are always in play, but they're really expensive. Let's look at running backs. Let's see how much Foreman is. Yeah, he's at that 4,400 range. So, all right, well, we'll go into game by game and check out some of these matchups. So the Giants first, the Browns. I have a 38.5 point total, which is super low, with Cleveland as 6.5 point favorites. Now, the question is, with Cleveland being this significant of favorites against the Giants, who's going to run the ball? Jerome Ford, you look at him last week, he had 7 rushing attempts in a game that they only lost, or they won 18-13. He only had 7 rushing attempts for 64 yards, 2 targets on top of that. This is where we look at Deontay Foreman. I'm not sure if maybe Ford got hurt in that game, but if you look at Foreman, Foreman had 14 rushing attempts for 42 yards. Didn't do much better, but it kind of signals to us that, maybe they're thinking about making a switch at the running back position. Deontay Foreman is a guy who's been impressive every time he's taken over a backfield, and yet he's still a journeyman. He gets traded every year to a different team, but he always delivers. And if you watched my content during the preseason, when we were doing these best ball drafts, I was drafting a lot of Deontay Foreman. So I already had a leaning towards him, but now he's at 4,400 for his salary, and that is about as cheap as we're gonna find for like value on the running back position. So keep Deontay Foreman in your player pool. He's going to be a guy where if we need salary relief or something like that, he's in a really good spot. As I mentioned, the Giants are giving up 26.5 DraftKings points a game to the running back position. That's among the highest in the league. Top 10, probably pushing top 5. So, that's a really good matchup for Deontay Foreman if he gets a heavy workload in this, which I think he might. What's the news on Jacoby Ford? Maybe we see some news on him. Yeah, I don't really see anything about an injury or anything like that. But for whatever reason, they decided to run a lot of Deontay Foreman. Now, we kind of pinpointed a situation like this last season with Chase Brown. I noticed that Chase Brown was starting to get a heavier workload, taking work away from Joe Mixon, who was super inefficient. And, these teams, when they're looking at the inefficiency of the run game, they're looking to spark something, and a switch to a different running back can help that offense a ton. And Foreman has, he's delivered everywhere he's been. So let's keep an eye on Foreman this week. All right, so let's look at wide receivers in this one. Now, this game, I would expect it to probably be more run heavy, just given the total in it, 38.5 point total. As far as receivers, though, Cooper has a decent matchup because the Giants are giving up 21.5 DraftKings points a game to wideouts. Slot does not have as good a matchup. That's where Elijah Moore has been playing lately, and Jerry Jeudy's been playing a lot in the slot as well. Jerry Jeudy also has, like good matchups on the outside. So Cooper and Jeudy, either of those guys could be in play this week. Let's look at their salaries. Cooper has been a disappointment so far this year, but he's been getting the opportunities, 8 targets and 9 targets. He just hasn't been catching the ball. He's at 6,100 for his salary. And Jeudy is at 5,200 for his salary, and he's gotten 6 and 8 targets. So both these guys get a decent amount of targets. Just not sure, like, the game script is going to favor us in this one. Malik Neighbors, another guy of interest in this game. You saw him crush last week. He was a guy that we were putting in our player pool last week. 18 targets. You're not going to see that every week, and that was against Washington's weak defense. This is a much tougher matchup against Cleveland. So I'm not interested really in Malik Neighbors this week, but hopefully he'll have a bad week and get us a discount on ownership in a couple weeks. Other than that, I'm not really seeing too much else that I like. I don't like anyone on the Giants side. Cleveland, I like those few players that I talked about. The other thing to note is David Njoku, when he went out, I believe Elijah Moore, his workload bumped up a little bit. But I think that Jerry Jeudy is a guy that could benefit from that as well with his 35% routes in the slot. So keep that in mind with Jerry Jeudy this week. He might be the guy to lean towards, but Cooper is going to break out here. He's going to have a big week eventually, and this is probably a pretty good setup for Cooper as well. He's just expensive, so price-wise, if we're looking for a guy, maybe Jeudy would be a better option if you wanted to play someone from this game. Low total, though. Chicago versus Indy. This puts Chicago in a matchup that we've been targeting every week, especially for the running back position. Indy has been giving up 26.2 DraftKings points a game to the running back. Chicago has not been great at stopping the run either, or at least last year they weren't. Last year, Chicago was giving up 24 DraftKings points. This year, they're giving up 20.6 DraftKings points. Indy is only giving up 23.3 DraftKings points. Last year, they were giving up 26.2 DraftKings points. But, still, Indy has been a good target for us each week so far. I think Josh Jacobs had a decent game against them last week. Let's see what Josh Jacobs did last week. He might not have scored a touchdown. And maybe that's why he didn't. Josh Jacobs last week ran for 151 yards off 32 attempts, did not score a touchdown, so they only ended up with 17 DraftKings points. So those numbers on Indy's side are skewed a little bit because these guys haven't been scoring touchdowns, or at least Josh Jacobs didn't. Saquon also destroyed them in week 1. Actually, they didn't play Indy in week 1. Who did Indy play in week 1? Let's see. Let's see how Indy played in week 1. They played Houston, and that's the week that Mixon went off for us. So, yeah, they are giving up a lot of rushing yards to running backs this year, and that puts Swift in an interesting spot, especially the struggles that Caleb Williams has had. Although I do think that they're going to try to get Caleb Williams right at some point, and this is a great matchup to do it. His first couple matchups against Houston and Tennessee, maybe not the best matchups, not exactly like the most difficult matchups either, but this puts Caleb Williams in a great spot because Indy has been giving up, 15.8 DraftKings points a game to quarterbacks, but they've been giving up 25 DraftKings points a game to wideouts, which makes DJ Moore interesting, as well as Odunze, because I believe Odunze was getting more work with Keenan Allen out. Last week, he had 5 targets. He had 4 targets in week 1. Didn't do anything with them. Odunze was running a lot more routes in the slot last week once Keenan Allen went out. He had total on the season, 35% of his routes have been in the slot for Odunze, 45% on the right side of the field. But yeah, wideouts are a position that we want to target against Indy in addition to running backs. So that is going to make those 3 guys interesting: Swift, Moore, and Odunze. On the other side, not really too interested in anyone on the Indy side because Chicago's defense has been really good. So I don't think we need to necessarily go there or worry about any types of game stacks. DeAndre Swift, as far as his ownership, let's see what his ownership is. I'm seeing 1.2% ownership for DeAndre Swift in this matchup that we've been intentionally targeting every week. So if you're looking for one of our sneaky plays right off the bat, there you go with DeAndre Swift at 5,600. You get a cheap guy. He's in a great matchup. He hasn't done anything yet this year. So, like he hasn't delivered like any fantasy output, but he finds himself in a good matchup this week, and it should be a tight game, or maybe they're favored a little bit. It depends on how Anthony Richardson does. Inaccurate quarterback going against a tough defense. Like no matter how much upside Richardson has, like this could be a game that he struggles in. So just keep that in mind with Richardson. Let's move on to the next game, Houston at Minnesota. Let's see. This one, we are looking at a total of 45 and a half points, with Houston as 24 point or 2.5 point favorites with a team total of 24 points. So Houston in this one, the wideouts have the best matchup from a DraftKings point per game perspective, and tight ends. So Houston, Schultz, this could be the week that Schultz finds his way to fantasy production. Wideouts also have that good matchup. As far as the wideouts, it looks like Diggs might have the best matchup, but Minnesota's only giving up 8.9 DraftKings points a game to the slots. Thing to keep in mind with Minnesota, they blitz a lot, and CJ Stroud has done well against the blitz, so it might not be that effective against Stroud this week, which makes those wideouts very interesting. Nico Collins, obviously, in play. Nico he's had a couple good weeks so far. He's 30 DraftKings points and 20 DraftKings points. Feels like chasing to go there. So maybe this is the Tank Dell week, the week that they get Tank Dell going. He's got only 2 DraftKings points and 9 DraftKings points, but we all know that Tank Dell is capable of breaking out at any week, and this would be a potential matchup to do it against Minnesota, especially if some of the trickery from Brian Flores gets to CJ Stroud and he's looking to dump the ball off a little bit quicker this week. That would make him Tank Dell very interesting, in addition to Nico Collins. So keep those guys in mind. Not overall liking too much with that Houston side, though. As far as Minnesota, Justin Jefferson also has a good matchup. Looking at 22.5 DraftKings points a game is what Houston has given up to wideouts. So that puts Justin Jefferson in play. They're also giving up 18.2 DraftKings points a game to quarterbacks. So, that could be interesting for Darnold as well. Maybe Darnold to Justin Jefferson. If you want, like mini stacks, you can run it back with Tank Dell, Dalton Schultz. Both those guys have decent matchups on the Houston side, as I was mentioning earlier. Schultz is another guy who hasn't done anything. So it could be a game where Schultz, it could be a game where Dell, we start to see something out of those guys. That they're going to want to keep those guys engaged so that they are productive throughout the season. So don't be shocked to see Dell or Schultz be involved in this game plan this week. All right, Philly at New Orleans. This is a game where I feel like it's not going overlooked, but it should have more ownership than it does. We're looking at this game is let's see, what's the total on this game? Looking at a 49.5 point total, with New Orleans as 2.5 point favorites in this one. A.J. Brown is going to be out again. I think a lot of people are leaning towards Devonta Smith, like as far as ownership. I don't know if that's the right move, though, because Devonta he's moved out of the slot last week. He moved out of the slot for a lot of his routes. His slot percentage on the season is 57%, but prior to that, it was like something like 70%. So he cut back on his slot routes a lot last week, and that is where New Orleans has been, pretty vulnerable. They've been giving up 12.7 DraftKings points a game to the slot, so that's like a bottom 10 number type of matchup that we want to target. But Devontae is going to have probably the coverage of Marshawn Lattimore. You want to keep an eye on Marshawn Lattimore's status if you're going to start Devontae like in this matchup, because if Lattimore ends up playing, he's going to be likely shadowing Devontae, and on top of the less slot routes and Lattimore covering him, Jalen Hurts also targets him a lot less in man coverage, which is where the Saints are doing most of their defense in man coverage, or they do a lot of man coverage, more than average. And Jalen Hurts has traditionally targeted A.J. Brown in those scenarios. Last week, we targeted Devontae in the showdown as a captain, just based on, like the obvious with A.J. Brown being out, but also with, the zone coverage that they were facing. And there was just a bunch of positives for Devontae last week, but those are all gone this week facing man coverage. But it's a game that should shoot out. I would look more towards the slot in this matchup. This week, this year, the Saints have been giving up 12.7 DraftKings points a game to slots. Last year, they were giving up 19.7 DraftKings points a game. They're also giving up 21.9 DraftKings points a game out wide this year. A guy that might be sneaky this week is Britton Covey. And let's look at what he did. If you watched Showdown, he kind of came out of nowhere. He's only 3,200. He ended up getting 6 targets last week with A.J. Brown out. But if you look at Kellen Moore's offenses, he loves to target slot receivers. He loves to get slot receivers engaged in these games and involved. And he had Keenan Allen last year. Mike Williams went out early in the season, but Keenan Allen still ended up with, the best, probably, I think, the best season that he's ever had. And obviously he's a slot receiver. And Kellen Moore had elevated CeeDee Lamb prior to that. So he likes to use these slot receivers. He's used to using these stud slot receivers. We saw it with Devontae Smith. He wanted to move him more into the slot, and he did early on in the season. But then obviously when A.J. Brown got hurt, he needed Devontae out wide. But that's where Britton Covey's going to have his opportunities, because 6 targets last week. I would not be surprised to see him get a decent amount of targets in this matchup this week, especially if Jalen Hurts is under a little bit of pressure with New Orleans blitzing him and playing man coverage. Like, if he doesn't have a propensity to target Devontae Smith in man coverage, then Britton Covey might be able to fill in that role this week. Goddard is another guy that would be interesting this week. He hasn't done anything this year yet. He's only at 4,600, so I like that price on him as well. Last week, he got 4 targets. Week 1, he was 5 targets, but he hasn't really done anything with the targets he's gotten. But Goddard is capable of putting up a game any given week. Although as far as New Orleans tight end defense, they've only been giving up 5.9 DraftKings points a game to the tight end position. Let's check and see who they've faced. Taysom Hill is doubtful this week, by the way. Carolina and Dallas. Dallas without Ferguson. So they haven't had any tough competition against tight ends, but that might be a good smokescreen for us with Goddard if we want to target Goddard this week. Last year, New Orleans was giving up middling 12.4 DraftKings points a game to the slot position. As far as other plays, Kamara and Barkley are both in play. Like the matchup for Barkley doesn't look as good on paper. They're giving up, New Orleans is giving up 19.3 DraftKings points a game, but I just showed you who they played weeks 1 and 2. So this is going to be their first test as far as the running back defense. And for New Orleans, for Kamara, Philly has been vulnerable against the run as well. Same situation with Jacobs. Jacobs started looking good towards the end of that game against Philly, but he just didn't score a touchdown. So didn't end up making a fantasy impact. And obviously that's going to affect the points per game that Philly's defense has given up. So Kamara and Barkley are both in play this week. Something to keep in mind when you're building your lineups. And as far as receivers, I like Shaheed the most. Shaheed is running a majority of his routes from the slot, I believe. He is at, let's see. Well, he's at 28% of his routes in the slot. It was higher before last week, but Mason Tipton is a guy running a lot of slot routes. He's running 36% of his routes from the slot. I don't know how much playing time he is actually getting, though. But Rashid Shaheed would be a guy that I'm interested in with 30, close to 30% of his routes in the slot against Philly's defense, who, we love to target against, the middle of the field guys. And in this case, it looks like Rashid Shaheed is the best guy to target there. Juwan Johnson, also interesting. Hasn't gotten a lot of targets yet this season. Who was the other guy? Moreau is the guy that came over from the Raiders. 4 targets week 1, none last week. But I do like how the Saints have been playing this year. You probably heard it all over the place. They're playing with a lot more motion, which has helped Carr so far this season. But, it's going to be this is a game that could shoot out. I don't see as much ownership on it as I would think that there would be. This could be the game where Olave breaks out because the Eagles have been also weak against, just wideouts in general. They've been giving up, 17 DraftKings points a game to wideouts in general. Again, they haven't faced any stiff competition, so the Eagles will be their biggest challenge yet. But the fact that they were giving up 26 DraftKings points, the Eagles are giving up 26 DraftKings points a game to slots is really good for guys like Shaheed. And I misspoke there. 16.8 DraftKings points is what Philly has given up to wideouts. And Philly's had, stiffer competition. They've had Green Bay in week 1 with Jordan Love still active. And then last week they played Kirk Cousins. Game they should have won, but Kirk Cousins did pretty good against them. So, yeah, I do like these New Orleans wideouts against this Philly defense. And Olave is going to break out here at some point. 6 targets last week, only 2 against Carolina. But they blew both those teams out. So expect Olave to be much more involved in this game. I think it'll be a closer game, obviously, than at least Carolina, and Dallas is kind of weak this year. Let's see. Okay, we'll move on to Pittsburgh and the Chargers. Let's see what kind of matchup we're looking at here. Don't see anything that pops off the page. Both these defenses are pretty good this year. This would probably just be a game to skip. So let's check out the Well, let's go over Dobbins real quick. Dobbins has had a decent year so far this year. Obviously, he's been the go-to guy, 135 yards, 131 yards. We knew that this was going to be a run-heavy offense. They also have had two relatively easy matchups to start the season off with Carolina and Las Vegas. So, I expect Herbert to be used a lot more once they start facing stiffer competition. Herbert may be out this week. Still waiting on news there. So keep an eye on the injury report there. But Dobbins has a decent matchup in that situation. Looks like Russ Wilson is questionable. But I think with things working with Fields so far this season, I don't think they're going to turn away from Fields yet. But I'm not sure what the status is going to be with the starting quarterback, but I'm really not interested in the starting quarterback in this game regardless. Only guy I'd really be interested in is Dobbins. Everyone else is just in bad matchups. So this is a game you can cross out basically. Denver at Tampa Bay. This game is going to be a 39.5 point total with Tampa Bay 6.5 point favorites. You've been watching the show. We've been targeting Godwin every week. This week, though, I think I'm going to stop as Denver's only giving up 5.2 DraftKings points a game to the slot position. They're only giving up 12.1 DraftKings points a game to wideouts. And let's see who they faced. They faced Pittsburgh and Seattle. So like Seattle, they faced a really good passing offense. And Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh's got some weapons. They're not incompetent. So they faced two relatively good teams, and they've been able to hold up on their defense. So not really interested in too much there. As far as the running back situation, this could be the week that we see Rachaad White do something, with Denver giving up 23.9 DraftKings points a game to the running back position, and also with them being almost touchdown favorites playing at home in this one. So Rachaad White might be the only guy that I would leave in my player pool. He's pretty expensive though at 6,100. And he hasn't done anything this year yet, but that really doesn't mean too much with only 2 games into the season. Bucky Irving has been eating into his workload. 7 attempts last week, 9 attempts the week before that. Bucky also had 3 targets against Washington. So the rookie is eating into White's workload a little bit, but he hasn't really done too much with that opportunity. So nothing to chase Rachaad White away. Let's see. As far as the running back matchups, Denver has a really good running back matchup because Tampa Bay's given up 32.7 DraftKings points a game to running backs. So that is significant. And that's going to put Williams in play, at least for me. 11 attempts for 17 yards, 8 attempts for 23 yards. So, he's heavily involved in the passing game, though. It looks like 5 targets last week against Pittsburgh. Williams has had 2 tough matchups, too. He's got Seattle and Pittsburgh that he's faced. So this could be the breakout week for Williams. And I would imagine that they're going to take a run-heavy approach in this one. They're going to try to shut down Tampa Bay with their defense and run the air out of the ball to keep the ball out of the hands of Bo Nix and to keep the ball out of the hands of the Bucs. So expect Williams to have a decent amount of work. He's only 5,400, so Williams is super cheap. McLaughlin, I mean, he hasn't been getting that much work. He only got 6 attempts, 3 attempts last week, 10 attempts in week 1. Last week was a pretty close game, though, and he only got 3 attempts. So, yeah, I would keep Williams in my player pool this week. He's got a really good matchup, and he has somewhat of a potential game script there if their game is any sort of competitive and they're able to slow down Tampa Bay with their defense, and they do have a good defense. So keep that in mind with Denver's running backs. We'll move on to the next game. We don't need to spend much more time on this one. So if we're looking at the next game, we got Green Bay at Tennessee. This is a game with a 37.5 point total. A lot of low totals in this slate. So 37.5 points. Tennessee is 2.5 point favorites. They're anticipating Malik Willis playing based on those numbers. Let me double check, see what the most current numbers are, see if that's given us any indication of Jordan Love's status. Jordan Love is questionable right now, and we'll check and see if the line has moved at all. Let's see. Green Bay at Tennessee. So Green Bay are 3-point dogs in this one. So, the total's still 37.5 points. So if you think Jordan Love's going to play, you might want to try to grab that. But it's looking like Vegas does not think he's going to play. So keep that in mind. But if he does play, Tennessee has been giving up, let's see, not much to wideouts. They've only been giving up 9.3 DraftKings points to wideouts and only 8.9 DraftKings points to slots. But we've seen this when this Green Bay offense is clicking, they can do a lot of damage. The running backs have been doing well against Tennessee. So Josh Jacobs is in play regardless of who the quarterback is. 24.2 DraftKings points a game is what Tennessee's given up so far this year. Green Bay has been giving up 26.9 DraftKings points, so that puts Pollard firmly in play, especially with all the mistakes that Levis has been making in the total and home favorites. So Pollard is firmly in play this week. Let's see what Pollard's salary is. Pollard is $6K. Pretty expensive, actually. I would expect him not to be that expensive. 18 DraftKings points and 15 DraftKings points is what he's delivered. But he's got a good matchup. He's definitely in play with the right game script. And wideouts versus Green Bay have been scoring 22.4 DraftKings points per game. Slots, not so great. So if I was looking at a Tennessee wideout, Calvin Ridley would be in play. Let's check out Ridley. He's at $6K, so that's not too expensive for Ridley. 24 DraftKings points last week, but I do think that this would be more of a Pollard game than a Ridley game. So if Jordan Love is in, then Ridley's in play. If Jordan Love is in, I think Pollard is still in play. And then if he's in, then all those Green Bay wideouts are in play because they're like, I won't say matchup proof, but they're about as close to matchup proof as you can get. Last year, the Titans were giving up 20.1 DraftKings points a game to the slot. So maybe that's where they're weaker. They've strengthened up their secondary this year, but that's Ladarius Sneed. So he's a perimeter defender, I believe. So that would make the slot the most interesting, and that would put Jaden Reed in play. Jaden Reed is, where are we at with him? He's at 5,900, so he's not overly expensive. If Jordan Love plays, I'd put Jaden Reed in my player pool. All right, let's move on to the next game. Miami and Seattle. This game is 41.5 point total. Seattle is 4.5 point favorites. They are playing in Seattle, so Miami traveling across country for this one with Tua out. So they're playing with a inexperienced quarterback in Skylar Thompson. The guy's been a disaster when he started, like as far as an offensive production standpoint. So I don't really like anyone. I don't know why he's 5,100 either. That's crazy to me. If I was looking at anyone in this game, it'd be Charbonnet, because the Dolphins have given up 28 DraftKings points a game to running backs, and Charbonnet is at 6K. Jesus, like that's expensive for Charbonnet. So he's gonna. Let's see what his ownership is. Looking at 16% ownership. So if you were looking for a reason to fade him, like 6K is a lot for Charbonnet. I think you can make up all sorts of stories for getting him out of your lineup. Other than that, I don't see any other matchups that I like on the Seattle side at all. On the Miami side, I don't see any good matchups there either, except for tight end. So maybe Jonnu Smith you could leave in your player pool. 3,400. So at least he's cheap. But there's an option for that game if you wanted to start anybody there. But Charbonnet, really good matchup, but he's expensive and he's going to be 16% owned. So just keep that in mind. All right. Carolina at Las Vegas. This is an interesting game, like I was mentioning earlier. Make sure to hit that like button. Looking for 30 likes on this one to put out a shorter video later on. And subscribe to the channel. Help me get to 1,000 subscribers. I'm at only 120 away. So I need 120 more subscribers to hit that 1,000 mark, and that helps me out big time. So if you've made money from the recommendations the last few weeks, or if you like the content, help me out, get me that engagement, get me those subscribers, because that's what helps me out as far as trying to do something more with this stuff. This is a game where we're looking at two cheap quarterbacks, sloppy shootout written all over it. We got a switch to Andy Dalton from Bryce Young. We put a competent quarterback in here. Competent quarterback with Dave Canales. We've seen what Dave Canales has done for Russell Wilson in the past, Geno Smith in the past. And then last year with Baker Mayfield, helping to kind of resurrect those guys and get them playing well again. Andy Dalton, he came in last year. He had a pretty good game in substitution for Bryce Young. And now this year, they just made a conscientious switch to him. It's not an injury-related thing. They're just tired of, Bryce Young dropping the ball, not performing. So they've decided to give Dalton a shot. Now, they brought in a bunch of weapons during the offseason, as far as, well, I would say a bunch of weapons, but they brought in Deontay Johnson, who is a reliable receiver once he has a quarterback that can throw to him. 6 targets each of the first 2 weeks. Hasn't really done anything with it, but you got to excuse that because of the Bryce Young situation. Now, he's a guy that will benefit, and Adam Thielen is another guy that will benefit. Thielen's only 5K. Deontay's only 4,900. So that makes this game really interesting. As far as what Vegas has been giving up to wideouts, 21. I take that back. They've given up 13.6 DraftKings points to slot receivers and 14.7 DraftKings points a game to wideouts. So not the best matchup, but who've Vegas played? They played the Chargers, who don't throw the ball, and then they played Lamar Jackson last week. So they've really only played one team that can throw the ball. So I wouldn't put too much weight into those lighter, like, points allowed totals for the wideouts. I would be more interested in just trying to take advantage of that value and exploit, maybe the potential of Andy Dalton to do something this week. Let's put Dalton in there. I'm going to stack him with Thielen, just because Thielen has the better matchup. You could easily swap that out to Deontay too. We can do that in a minute. On the Vegas side, we're looking at a few good matchups, because Carolina has been decimated by running back position. So that puts Zamir White in a good spot. But Zamir White, Alexander Mattison, they're the two running backs over on the Vegas side. They haven't done anything this year. They've looked really bad. Zamir White, all the opportunity in the world. 5.6 DraftKings points against the Chargers. Granted, it's probably pretty good defenses. The Baltimore, let me check Baltimore run defense. I don't know why I can't find it. Here it is. Okay, Baltimore's been giving up 16.6 DraftKings points to the running back. Obviously, Zamir White contributed to that low amount, but Zamir White, they're going to try to get him going against this weekend Carolina pass or running defense. So Zamir White at 5,500. Let's see what his ownership is. Let's see. Zamir White is at 8.3% in this just great matchup for him. So let's plug him in. I don't want to overload on this game, but like there's so many guys in good matchups. Like we're looking at the tight end position too. Carolina's given 18.5 DraftKings points a game to tight end position. That is Atlanta's given up 29 DraftKings points a game to tight ends. I got to check that and see who they've been giving up those points to. But that puts Brock Bowers firmly in play. Bowers has been doing great as a rookie. He hasn't scored a touchdown yet. And he has 18.8 DraftKings points last week and 11.8 versus the Chargers. So Bowers, an easy run back option. And, I mean, we got Adams, too. Adams crushed last week. He got 29 DraftKings points off of 12 targets. Not much in week one. As far as the wide receiver matchup for wideouts, Carolina's given up 21.6 DraftKings points to wideouts on top of it. So really, there's just, like everyone on Vegas who you would be interested in has a good matchup. So this is going to be an interesting one. We need Dalton to be able to perform in this one for any of this to work. Let's get White out of there. Let's say that they struggle. Let's say that Dalton's able to keep it competitive. Let's get Johnson in there instead. Although Thielen does have the better matchup, and Thielen's the guy he connected with last year. Thielen ended up going off for a really good game in that one too. Let's put Adams in there too. I know I'm overloading on this game, but let's just do it for shits and giggles. I think other than that, Hubbard is the only other guy that has a good matchup. Vegas has been giving up 24 DraftKings points a game to running backs. They've also been giving up 11.4 to tight ends, but there's really no one to target there. So, problem with Vegas, at least historically, like the last couple years, they don't give up a lot of touchdowns to wideouts. So that's why I wouldn't go too heavy. Maybe we swap out Dalton for Minshew. Let's just say that Dalton gives us the value with, just being a competent quarterback and being able to keep this game a little bit more competitive. So if we got Minshew in there to Adams and Bowers, running it back with Johnson. Now let's go to some of these other high total games. We got Detroit at Arizona. Another interesting game. This one is going to be a 51.5 point total. A lot of ownership will be on this one. Not as much as there should be, though. I was looking at Amon-Ra. It looked like he was around like 10% owned, and he is in a great matchup against Arizona. Arizona's been giving up 19.7 DraftKings points a game. Even better on the other side, Detroit has been giving up 28 DraftKings points a game to the slot. A lot of that was Cooper Kupp, but then they had Godwin last week. If you remember last week, I was recommending starting Godwin against this weak slot defense. Detroit was also giving up 22.8 to the slot last season, so it's been consistent. So Dortch would be the guy that would be interesting in that situation. Dortch he got 8 targets week 1, but only 2 targets last week. I would expect Dortch to get heavy targets this week in this matchup. And see, this is the problem when we're double stacking this Vegas game. Maybe we take out Adams there so we can get St. Brown in there. St. Brown is expensive, though, especially compared to Adams. So let's just keep moving on here. I don't want to use up all my bullets in these two games. 21.6 DraftKings points for those wideouts for Vegas. So let me move on back to this Detroit Arizona game. All right, so the slot receivers on either side of this game are definitely in play. Quarterbacks are both in play. Detroit getting 18.9 DraftKings points a game from Arizona's defense, and Arizona is getting 17.7 DraftKings points a game from that Detroit defense. So either quarterback is in play, but I would lean obviously more towards Murray, but the ownership seems to be on Murray, so Goff might be a sneakier play. What's Goff's salary here? $6,500. He's way too pricey. Way too pricey, but in a good matchup. I'd rather pay the $400 extra to get that Murray upside. But that's this game. I would expect it to be, they're playing in Arizona, so they're playing indoors. Detroit's coming off a loss in this one. Arizona is coming off a big win. Maybe a letdown spot for Arizona in this. Detroit probably going to want it more. And that's where, I go back to Amon-Ra in that situation. So we got a couple guys from that one. Those are both, pretty low owned guys. Jameson Williams is the other guy I would be interested in this one. Been playing him every week so far, and he hasn't let down. Like last week was more of a letdown than the previous week. I used him as my run back in that Tampa Bay stack. If you guys remember last week, Tampa Bay stacks worked out really well, by the way. Gesicki coming through for us as the cheap tight end in the short video. Another reason why you want to subscribe and like the video to make sure that you're getting those short videos. But 11 targets last week, 9 targets in week 1, 27 DraftKings points and 14 DraftKings points. So Jameson Williams is definitely in play again. And you know what? We might let's see what the wideouts were again here. Wide receivers. Arizona's only given up 15.3. That's a middling matchup, but Jameson Williams, low ownership, cheap price. You know, you can't go wrong with having him in your player pool. And we'll mess around, see if maybe he's the guy that we work in when we get to the lineup build. Yeah, I don't know why Dallas and Baltimore's not. Oh, that's why. All right, so we got Dallas at Baltimore. This is another game that could shoot out. This is a game with a 48.5 point total. Quarterback on the Baltimore side has a good matchup. Lamar Jackson. Dallas has given up 17.6 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback. They're also giving up 35.9 DraftKings points a game to running backs. So that makes, obviously, Derrick Henry very interesting this week. Let's see what Derrick Henry's ownership is. Derrick Henry is looking at 5% owned in this matchup where Dallas has given up that many. Obviously, that's skewed heavily because of the Kamara performance last week, but that's still like what they do. Who they play in week 1? They played Cleveland in week 1, so that's basically all Kamara in that that number that I showed you. So Henry's still in play, just not as good as it would have been if Dallas was consistently bad against the running back in both weeks. Slots, as far as the slots, nothing really good there. Baltimore's been really good Dallas has been really good against the slot. They're only giving up 2.9 DraftKings points. Baltimore has been a little bit middling against the slot, giving up 8.7 DraftKings points. CeeDee Lamb, like I'd say he's in play. Baltimore's also been giving up 26.2 DraftKings points a game to wideouts and 17 DraftKings points a game to tight end position. And we got Ferguson back this week. Ferguson, coming off of, they thought it was going to be an ACL tear at first. And then, somehow he's back 2 weeks later, ended up being a much, much less damaging injury. So that's good for Ferguson. But I would not expect him to do too much on his first week back from a knee injury. So that 17 DraftKings points that Baltimore's given up to the tight end position, might not be able to take advantage of that like we would like to. But on the Baltimore side, you got good matchups seemingly for Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, and Zay Flowers, I'd say too, because Dallas has been giving up 23.2 DraftKings points a game to wideouts. I think Zay runs a lot in the slot. He's 41% of his routes are on the right side of the field, 29 in the slot, and then 28 to the left. So, 70% of his routes on the outside. So Zay is in play at, like the matchup that we're looking at now. How much is his salary though? Zay Flowers. 6,800. That's expensive. That is way expensive for a guy who doesn't really put up that many points. He got 22 DraftKings points last week. That's like a ceiling for Zay Flowers. But that's about it for this game. Lamar Jackson is expensive at 7,500. 29 DraftKings points and 17 DraftKings points. Prescott, 14 and 15 and 12. So not really interested in either of those guys really, but you could make a case for a Dak Prescott stack or Probably more so of a Lamar Jackson stack, honestly. Prescott is 6,600 versus 7,500 for Jackson. They're playing in Dallas, so playing at home, tough matchup. But a tough matchup as in competitive matchup, playing against a really good team. So Dallas will probably show up for this one, and it could end up being a shootout as that totals leading us to believe. So I don't hate stacking the game, but those are the matchups. San Francisco at the Rams. A lot of injuries in this one. We got McCaffrey out. Kupp is out. Samuel is out. Nakua is out. Kittle is out. Higbee is out. Everybody's out in this one, which gives us some value options. Demarcus Robinson at 5K. I like him a lot. If you remember last year, Stafford was going to him heavily towards the end of the season, and now he's going to be basically the go-to guy. So I like Robinson a lot at 5K in this one, and I don't think that I don't think I saw that his ownership was that high in it either. I'm seeing 6.3% projected ownership. That could be off though. Like, depends on which ownership source you're looking at. But Demarcus Robinson definitely in play at 5K. He's proven himself in those situations before. Tutu Atwell, I would keep him in my player pool too, because he's delivered when they've been short on receivers as well. A couple options there. On the San Francisco side, Juwan Jennings, third and Juwan. I like him. With Debo being out, he gets a bigger workload, obviously, and he's mainly a slot receiver, but he's going to be getting a lot more work. Last year, I think when Debo was out, Ronnie Bell was a guy that came in and played more out wide, but he didn't really do anything. But Juwan Jennings, after that Super Bowl performance especially, I wouldn't be surprised if they try to take advantage of the opportunity to use more Juwan Jennings this week, especially with Kittle out too. With Kittle out too, they might use a lot more 3 wide out sets. Although if they're missing Debo, I think they're probably have more depth at wide receiver than tight end. But be interested to see what they do to compensate for that. Brandon Ayuk, definitely in play, 6,200. Especially with Kittle and Samuel out. Like, that's going to be, he's going to get a lot of opportunity. He'll also get a lot of the attention from the defense. Jordan Mason, again, crushing. Another week with Jordan Mason. If you watched the Showdown show, we were recommending him, or I was recommending him, like, even without Christian McCaffrey being labeled as out, we would have just freaking crushed on that slate if they waited until the last minute to release that injury report, because we were starting him, as I had him as one of the players in the YouTube short before McCaffrey got even ruled out. So Jordan Mason delivered that week. He delivered last week. And I would not be surprised to see him deliver again, especially with the Rams giving up 30 DraftKings points a game to the running back position this year. So wheels up for Jordan Mason. He's also going to have the ownership. I think he's at about 50% projected ownership, but he's 6,200. I'm just going to plug him in. I don't care what the ownership is. Let's put Deontay Foreman in there too. See where that gets us for our salary. I think we can start building our actual lineups now. All right, so that's going to get us, let's pick our defense here. Rams against San Francisco. I don't like that. I don't like Arizona. Panthers, don't really like them. Although I don't mind the Panthers against Las Vegas. Miami at Seattle. Denver at Tampa Bay. New Orleans at Philly. Let's go with Chicago. I like Chicago at 2,600 against Indy. So that leaves us with 8,500 in the flex. That's going to leave us with options like Tyreek, Barkley. How much did I like Barkley? Let's see. Philly. Not the best matchup, but then again, like he hasn't had much stiff. New Orleans hasn't had much stiff competition. You could put Adams in there and get that double stack in this path. You got guys like you got basically anyone you want except for Jefferson and Lamb if you go in this direction. But everyone is cheap in our lineups, so it's not like the sexiest lineup. Let's get Foreman out of there. Let's get someone a little bit more. Let's put in Charbonnet just because we know he's going to. And let's put in Pollard, actually. I like Pollard better. 6,900, that's going to leave us within the flex. Got options like Devontae Smith in that situation, Gibbs. You can get one of these guys from this high scoring games. Flowers, Jacobs is in there. Although we already have Pollard running back in that game, so I probably wouldn't necessarily lean there. Derrick Henry, there's a lot of options. Neighbors. So that's one way you can go with it. Let's build one of those higher powered games. Let's see. Let's go with Derek Carr. 5,800 for Carr. Let's stack him with Olave. No, let's stack him with Shaheed first. What's Olave's price, though? 6,300. Yeah, let's stack him with Shaheed with that exposure in the slot. Let's put Mason in there. I don't really see a need to. Well, I mean, obviously the need is if you want to fade, 50% ownership. But let's get some Detroit exposure in here. With St. Brown. Let's run him back with Dortch. What's Dortch's injury status? Late addition to the Cardinals injury report. Never like seeing that. Implying he had tweaked his hamstring. Keep an eye on Dortch's situation. That would suck if he's out because he's 4,500 in that matchup. But you know what? Instead of Dortch, let's do Britton. All right, so that way we got our one of our run backs. We can put Barkley in there too. Now, if they follow the same kind of game plan that they did in week 1 as far as Philly goes, like they played another aggressive defense in week 1 in Green Bay's defense, who run a lot more man coverage. And we saw Jalen Hurts running less. And we saw Barkley seem like he was maybe a little bit more heavily involved. Let's see how many attempts they had week to week. 24 attempts in week 1. But he had 5 targets in week 2. So maybe ignore that, what I just said. But I do think that Barkley is good in this matchup, though, and we want to get a stud in there. So let's get Barkley in. Derek Carr is probably a guy that I want to double stack, but we'll leave him single stacked for now. Tight end, Greg Dortch. I forgot to mention Greg Dortch. Or not Greg Dortch. Dolchik. Dolchik has a good matchup this week. He is very cheap, 2,900. Tampa Bay is giving up. They've only given up 4.6 DraftKings points a game, but they haven't had a tough matchup. But they gave up 14.8 DraftKings points a game last season. And look at the targets for Dolchich. Last week, 8 targets, 3 targets in week 1, but 8 targets last week. So Dolchich is a guy at 2,900 who I like as like one of those sneaky cheap tight end plays this week. Let's look at defenses. Let's go back with Chicago in this one. Leaves us with 8K in the flex. You see what a couple guys like Britton Covey and Dolchich will do for you. If you wanted to, you could switch this to Hurts. Leaves us with 6,600 still. In the flex, we can get Diggs, Henry, Godwin. I don't really like Godwin's matchup. We got Dobbins, Neighbors, a lot of options. So, that's one another direction that we can go. This double stack Carr. Let's say we want Shaheed and we want Olave. That leaves us with 5K. So that's good too. Gives us plenty of options. Robinson, we see him in that situation. Guys like that. Let's see. What are those other high totals? Detroit, Arizona. Do I have a Detroit, Arizona representation in there? I got the Detroit side in there. I don't have Arizona, though. But if you guys wanted to get like an Arizona guy in there, you could easily swap out any of these guys. And then Dallas, Baltimore was the other one. And I think those guys are probably too pricey. Flowers is 6,800. What's Pollard? Pollard's 6K. He's a little too expensive too. But, I mean, you guys can mess around with it. Pollard be a good pivot if you wanted to get off Mason too, by the way. Much less owned. Still in a decent matchup and everything. But make sure to hit that like button. Get me to 30 likes. As you can tell, got a lot more thinking to do through this slate. And I can put out that shorter video once I hit 30 likes. And make sure to subscribe to the channel because you're going to want to get the alert when that video comes out. So make sure you hit subscribe and sign up for the alerts. And also open up an Underdog account. Use the promo code SEEK. They're going to match you 50% up to $1,000. So if you put in $2,000, they'll match you $1,000. You'll get $1,000 free money. You want to do that. I'll do a lot of pick'em stuff this year too. I just haven't gotten around to it yet, but I'll start doing some pick'em stuff, which will help us out with some of this Underdog promotion. And they're always giving away, like discounted guys. Let's see what their discounts are this week. Discounted guys for pick'ems, I should say. All right, so look at this. CeeDee Lamb, gimme pick. All he has to do is get over 0.5 yards. We can put him in our higher. Let's do this championship round real quick. See if we can find some guys. Stroud. Barkley. I like Barkley to score a touchdown tomorrow. But I don't like using those touchdown props. CeeDee Lamb. I'd put Adams higher than 67 against this defense. I'd put Carr. I think I like Carr higher than 241 against Philly. Let's see if we can get some Shaheed props. Obviously got to get that one. Oh, I just took it off. All right, let's see. All right, where's that Shaheed? All right, his numbers are at 0.5 touchdowns, 3.5. I think he can get higher than 3.5 receptions here. I like him for over that receiving yards too, but let's go with higher on those receptions. How many we got there? 4? The only thing I don't like is that I can only do $10. I got to figure out how to play on underdog here a little bit better. But we got Rashid Shaheed over 3.5 receptions. We got CeeDee Lamb, that gimme pick, over 0.5 yards. I got Carr over 241 passing yards. And I got Devontae Adams over 67.5 receiving yards. Putting $10 in there. If we get it right, we get $82. Boom. So there you go. There's a underdog pick'em. Hit that. First-time depositors, get that deposit bonus using the promo code SEEK. Make sure you use the promo code SEEK. You're going to have to type it in manually. But that'll get you 50% up to $1,000. So you can get $1,000 if you deposit $2,000. But I mean, even if you want to just play lightly during the season, when we get to playoff best ball, like that's my favorite game to play on underdog. And I think that's where we can do really well. Done really well like the last couple of years doing it, and been good at projecting teams to make it, into the playoffs and further than projected in the playoffs. So sign up for that, subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and I will see you guys later on.